A small hand clutched a piece of moldy bread outside a bakery in Chicago's South Side. The child's voice trembled as she asked strangers for help. Her mother hadn't eaten in 3 days. Marcus Donovan, the city's most feared crime lord, watched from his black sedan, his blood running cold. What he saw in that little girl's eyes would shatter the empire he'd built on ruthlessness and force him to confront the monster he'd become. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. Marcus Donovan stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office on Michigan Avenue, watching the November rain streak down the glass like tears he'd forgotten how to shed. Below, Chicago sprawled in all its brutal glory, a city of steel and ambition, where fortunes were made and lives were currency. The scent of expensive bourbon and leather filled the room, mingling with the faint aroma of his assistant's coffee from the outer office. Everything in this space spoke of power. The mahogany desk that had cost more than most people earned in a year, the original Rothko on the wall, the Persian rug that muffled footsteps and secrets alike. He was 42 years old, though the silver threading through his dark hair made him look older. His tailored Tom Ford suit fit him like armor, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes that caught the light when he moved. His face was all sharp angles, a jaw that could have been carved from granite, eyes the color of winter storms, a mouth that rarely smiled. There was a scar along his left cheekbone, barely visible now, a souvenir from his early days when he'd had to fight for every inch of territory. Now, people fought for the privilege of his attention. The Donovan organization controlled everything that mattered in Chicago's underworld. The docks, the unions, the politicians who pretended not to be on his payroll, the judges who owed him favors they could never repay. Marcus had built this empire from nothing, clawing his way up from the streets of Bridgeport, where he'd grown up watching his father drink himself to death in a 2-room apartment that smelled of mildew and broken dreams. He'd sworn he'd never be powerless again, never be the kind of man who begged for scraps. And he'd kept that promise. He'd become something else entirely. His phone buzzed. A text from Vincent Calabresi, his oldest friend and second in command. Meeting at the warehouse. 20 minutes. The Russians are getting restless. Marcus typed back a single word. Coming. He drained the last of his bourbon, feeling the burn slide down his throat, and grabbed his overcoat. The cashmere was soft against his fingers. Another reminder of how far he'd traveled from that cramped apartment in Bridgeport. The elevator descended in silence, the kind of heavy quiet that money bought. His driver, Tommy, was waiting by the black Mercedes sedan, engine already running. Tommy had been with him for 15 years, loyal as a dog and twice as useful. He never asked questions, never flinched at what he saw. That was worth more than gold in Marcus's world. Southside Warehouse, Marcus said, sliding into the back seat. The leather was cold against his back. They drove through downtown, past the Art Institute and Millennium Park, where tourists took selfies in front of the Bean, oblivious to the machinery of violence and commerce that kept their city running. The rain had intensified, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon. Marcus watched the city slide past, feeling nothing. That was his gift, or maybe his curse, the ability to look at the world and feel absolutely nothing at all. The South Side was different. Here, the buildings crouched lower, their facades crumbling like old teeth. Boarded-up storefronts alternated with corner stores protected by iron bars. This was where Marcus had started, where he'd made his first deals and his first kills. The neighborhood remembered him, even if he'd tried to forget it. Tommy slowed as they approached a red light near a small bakery called Rosie's Bread. The sign was faded, the windows fogged with condensation. Marcus barely glanced at it. Just another struggling business in a struggling neighborhood. The kind of place that would be gone in a year or two, swallowed by the city's endless appetite for renewal and destruction. Then he saw her, a little girl, no more than 7 years old, stood outside the bakery's side door where they threw out the day-old bread. She wore a thin jacket that was at least 2 sizes too small, her arms poking out of the sleeves like twigs. Her hair was dark and tangled, hanging in wet strings around a face that was all enormous eyes and sharp cheekbones. She was holding something in her hands. A piece of bread, Marcus realized, covered in spots of green and white mold. She was crying. Not the loud, dramatic crying of a child throwing a tantrum, but the quiet, hopeless sobbing of someone who'd already learned that the world didn't care about her tears. She approached a man hurrying past with an umbrella, holding out the moldy bread with shaking hands. "Please," Marcus heard her say. her voice barely audible over the rain and traffic. "Mommy hasn't eaten in 3 days. Can you share this? Just a little bit?" The man jerked away from her as if she were diseased, pulling his umbrella closer and quickening his pace. The little girl stood there in the rain, still holding out the bread, her thin shoulders shaking. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, a sensation so unfamiliar that for a moment he thought he was having a heart attack. His hand was on the door handle before he'd consciously decided to move. "Boss?" Tommy's voice held a question, confusion. Marcus never stopped for anything on the way to a meeting. Time was money, and money was power. "Wait here," Marcus said, his voice rough. He stepped out into the rain, feeling it soak immediately through his expensive coat. The cold shocked his system, made him feel suddenly, painfully alive. He walked toward the little girl, his Italian leather shoes splashing through puddles that would ruin them. She didn't notice him at first, too focused on trying to flag down another pedestrian who swerved around her without breaking stride. "Hey," Marcus said softly, crouching down so he was at her eye level. She turned to him, and he saw her face clearly for the first time. Beneath the dirt and tears, she was beautiful, or she would be, if she weren't so obviously starving. Her eyes were the color of honey, huge in her thin face. There was a bruise on her left arm, visible where her too small jacket rode up. Her lips were chapped and bleeding. "Mommy hasn't eaten," she said again, as if this were the only sentence she knew, the only truth that mattered. "Can you share, please?" Marcus looked at the moldy bread in her small hands. Something twisted in his gut, a feeling he'd spent 20 years trying to kill. When was the last time he'd felt anything like compassion? When was the last time he'd looked at another human being and seen something other than a tool or an obstacle? "Where's your mother?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. He'd forgotten he could sound like that. "Inside," the girl whispered, pointing to a narrow alley between the bakery and a boarded-up laundromat. "She's sick. She can't walk anymore." Marcus stood, his knees protesting. He was getting old, he thought absurdly. Old and hard and empty. "Show me," he said. The little girl's eyes widened with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. She took his hand. Her fingers were like ice, so small they disappeared completely in his palm, and led him into the alley. The smell hit him first. Urine, rotting garbage, and underneath it all, the sweet, sick scent of illness. A woman lay huddled against the brick wall, covered by a threadbare blanket that had probably been pulled from a dumpster. She was young, Marcus realized with a shock. Maybe 30, though she looked 50. Her face was gaunt, her skin the color of old newspaper. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Mommy," the little girl said, kneeling beside her. "Mommy, I found someone. He might help us." The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were the same honey color as her daughter's, but dimmed by fever and starvation. She looked at Marcus, and he saw the exact moment she recognized what he was. Not by name, perhaps, but by type. She'd seen men like him before, men in expensive suits who owned the world and everyone in it. She tried to pull her daughter closer, a protective gesture that broke something else inside Marcus's chest. "Please," she whispered, "don't hurt her. Whatever you want, just don't hurt my baby." Marcus felt Tommy's presence behind him, his driver having followed him into the alley. "Boss," Tommy said quietly, "we're late for the meeting. The meeting. The Russians. The empire that demanded his constant attention, his constant ruthlessness." Marcus looked at the woman and child huddled against the wall, then at his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's cars. He thought about the warehouse where Vincent was waiting, about the deals that needed to be made, the threats that needed to be delivered, the careful balance of fear and respect that kept his world spinning. He thought about the bourbon in his office, the Rothko on his wall, the Persian rug that muffled secrets. He thought about his father, dying alone in that apartment in Bridgeport, too proud to ask for help even as the world ground him down to nothing. "Call Dr. Reeves," Marcus said to Tommy. "Tell him I need him at my penthouse in 30 minutes. Tell him it's urgent and I don't care what he's doing." "Boss." "Now, Tommy." Marcus crouched down again, meeting the woman's frightened eyes. "What's your name?" "Anna," she whispered. "Anna Mitchell. This is my daughter, Lily. Anna, I'm going to help you, both of you, but you need to trust me." "Why?" The question was barely audible, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of disappointments, of promises broken and trust betrayed. Marcus didn't have an answer. He didn't know why. He only knew that if he walked away from this alley, If he left this woman and child to die in the rain while he went to his meeting and his empire and his expensive bourbon, something essential in him would die too. Something he hadn't even known was still alive until this moment. Because, he said finally, someone should. He lifted Anna into his arms. She weighed nothing, less than nothing, a collection of bones held together by will and desperation. Lily followed, still clutching her moldy bread like a talisman. Tommy opened the car door, his face carefully blank, asking no questions. As they pulled away from the curb, Marcus looked back at the alley, at the spot where Anna and Lily had been slowly dying, while the city rushed past, blind and deaf to their suffering. The rain continued to fall, washing away the evidence that they'd ever been there at all. His phone buzzed again. "Vincent, where are you? The Russians are pissed." Marcus turned off his phone and looked at the little girl sitting beside her mother in his back seat, her small hand still holding that piece of moldy bread. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, or a promise. The Empire could wait. For the first time in 20 years, Marcus Donovan had found something more important than power. He just didn't know yet what it would cost him. Dr. Reeves arrived at Marcus's penthouse exactly 28 minutes after Tommy's call, his medical bag in hand and questions written all over his face. He was a thin man in his 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful demeanor of someone who'd learned not to ask too many questions about his most lucrative client. Marcus paid him a retainer that was triple what he'd make at any hospital, and in return, Reeves treated bullet wounds, overdoses, and the occasional broken bone without ever filing a police report. But this was different. Marcus could see the confusion in Reeves's eyes as he examined Anna on the guest bedroom's king-sized bed, with little Lily hovering nearby, still refusing to let go of her mother's hand. "Severe malnutrition," Reeves said quietly, after his initial examination. "Dehydration, pneumonia, possibly sepsis from an untreated infection in her left foot. She needs a hospital, Marcus. IV antibiotics, proper monitoring. No hospitals," Marcus said flatly. "No records. You treat her here." Reeves opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He'd learned that lesson years ago. "I'll need to set up an IV, get her temperature down. The little girl, too. She's malnourished, probably anemic. When was the last time either of them ate a real meal?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "Fix it." While Reeves worked, Marcus stood at the window again, watching the rain continue its assault on the city. His phone sat on his desk, powered off, but he could imagine the messages piling up. Vincent would be furious. The Russians would take his absence as an insult, maybe even a sign of weakness. In his world, weakness was blood in the water, an invitation for sharks to circle closer. He should care about that. His entire life had been built on the principle that you never showed weakness, never let anyone see you flinch, never chose mercy over strength, and yet here he was, with a dying woman and her child in his guest room, while his empire began to crack at the edges. Tommy appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Vincent called my phone. He's on his way up. Let him come." 5 minutes later, Vincent Calabresi stormed into the penthouse like a force of nature. He was shorter than Marcus, built like a boxer, with a face that looked like it had been broken and reassembled several times. They'd grown up together in Bridgeport, two hungry kids who'd decided to take what the world wouldn't give them. Vincent had been there for Marcus's first collection, his first beating, his first kill. They were brothers in everything but blood. "What the hell, Marcus?" Vincent's voice was low and dangerous. "The Russians think you're playing them. Dimitri's talking about taking his business to the Italians on the north side. Do you know what that means? Do you know how many people are watching to see if you're losing your grip?" "I know." "Then what?" Vincent stopped as he noticed the open door to the guest room, saw Dr. Reeves adjusting an IV line. "Who is that?" "A woman and her daughter. I found them in an alley." Vincent stared at him as if he'd started speaking in tongues. "You missed the most important meeting of the year because you found some homeless people?" "Yes." "Have you lost your mind?" Vincent moved closer, lowering his voice. "Marcus, listen to me. This isn't you. You don't do charity cases. You don't pick up strays. You're the man who burned down the Moretti warehouse with 3 of their guys still inside because they were late on a payment. You're the man who told Judge Harrison you'd kill his grandkids if he didn't rule in our favor. That's who you are. That's who you need to be." Marcus turned from the window to face his oldest friend. "Maybe I'm tired of being that man." "Tired?" Vincent's laugh was harsh. "You don't get to be tired. You don't get to have a crisis of conscience. Not now. Not when we're this close to controlling everything. The Russians, the unions, the new casino development. It all falls apart if you go soft. I'm not going soft. Then what do you call this? Vincent gestured toward the guest room. You're risking everything we've built for two people you don't even know. People who can't do anything for you. Who can't help you. Who are just going to be a liability. In our world, Marcus, that's called weakness. And weakness gets you killed. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth. Vincent wasn't wrong. In the world they inhabited, compassion was a luxury that could cost you everything. Marcus had built his empire on the understanding that sentiment was for civilians, that the moment you started caring about people who couldn't advance your interests, you'd already lost. But he kept seeing Lily's face, those enormous honey-colored eyes, the way she'd held out that moldy bread and asked strangers to share it with her dying mother. They stay, Marcus said quietly, until they're well enough to leave on their own. Vincent's jaw tightened. And what do I tell the Russians? Tell them I had an emergency. Tell them we'll meet tomorrow, and if they have a problem with that, they can take their business elsewhere. They will, Marcus. They absolutely will. Then let them. Marcus's voice was cold now, the voice that had made men twice his size back down. I didn't build this empire by being afraid of the Russians or anyone else. If Dmitri wants to work with the North Side Italians, he'll learn very quickly why that's a mistake. And if anyone else thinks my absence from one meeting means I'm weak, they're welcome to test that theory. You know how that usually ends. Vincent studied him for a long moment, and Marcus could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Finally, Vincent nodded slowly. All right, I'll handle the Russians. But Marcus, this can't become a pattern. You can't start caring about every sob story in this city. There are millions of them, and they'll drag you down if you let them. I know. After Vincent left, Marcus returned to the guest room. Dr. Reeves had finished setting up the IV and was now examining Lily, who sat very still on a chair, her eyes wide and watchful. Anna was sleeping, her breathing already less labored than it had been in the alley. The mother will recover, Reeves said, assuming the antibiotics work and there are no complications. The daughter is severely malnourished, but she's young and resilient. With proper food and care, she should be fine. But Marcus, he hesitated. What's your plan here? These people need more than just medical treatment. They need stability, support, a place to live. That woman needs job training, probably therapy. The kid needs school, regular checkups, maybe counseling. This isn't something you can fix with money and walk away from. I know, Marcus said again. It seemed to be the only thing he could say tonight. After Reeves left, Marcus sat in the chair beside Anna's bed, watching her sleep. Lily had finally dozed off in another chair, her small body curled into a tight ball, that piece of moldy bread still clutched in her hand even in sleep. Marcus gently pried it from her fingers and threw it away, replacing it with a soft blanket. The penthouse was silent except for the rain against the windows and the steady beep of the IV monitor. Marcus thought about Vincent's words, about the empire that demanded his ruthlessness, about the careful balance of fear and respect that kept his world intact. He thought about his father, dying alone. He thought about all the people he'd hurt, all the lives he'd destroyed in his climb to the top. He'd told himself it was necessary, that you couldn't build an empire without breaking a few eggs. That sentiment was a weakness he couldn't afford. But sitting here in the quiet, watching this woman and child sleep, he wondered if maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe the real weakness wasn't compassion. Maybe it was the inability to feel anything at all. His phone sat on the nightstand, still powered off. Outside, his empire was cracking. His enemies were circling. His allies were questioning his strength. Everything he'd built over 20 years was at risk because he'd stopped his car for a little girl with moldy bread. And yet, looking at Lily's peaceful face as she slept, warm and safe for the first time in who knew how long, Marcus couldn't bring himself to regret it. The rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the city, the Russians were making plans, and Vincent was doing damage control, and the machinery of Marcus's empire ground on without him. For tonight, at least, he didn't care. He'd found something in that alley, something he'd thought he'd lost forever, a piece of his own humanity, buried under 20 years of violence and ambition. It was fragile and frightening, this feeling of actually caring whether someone lived or died, but it was real. And Marcus Donovan, the man who'd built an empire on ruthlessness, discovered that he wasn't quite ready to let it go. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Anna woke 3 days later, her fever finally broken. her eyes clearer than they'd been in the alley. Marcus was in his office when Tommy knocked and told him, and he found himself walking to the guest room with something uncomfortably close to nervousness. He'd faced down rival gang leaders, corrupt politicians, and federal investigators without breaking a sweat, but the thought of talking to this woman made his palms damp. She was sitting up in bed when he entered, Lily curled against her side. Both of them looked better, color in their cheeks, the hollowness beginning to fade from their faces. Dr. Reeves had been coming twice daily, and Marcus's housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had been bringing them soup, sandwiches, anything they could keep down. "You're awake," Marcus said, immediately feeling stupid. Obviously, she was awake. Anna's honey-colored eyes studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Lily told me what you did, that you brought us here, got us a doctor. I don't understand why." "Neither do I," Marcus admitted. He pulled up a chair, maintaining a careful distance. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm dreaming. Like I'm going to wake up back in that alley." Her voice was stronger now, though still rough. "Who are you?" "Really?" Marcus considered lying, giving her some sanitized version of himself. But something about the way she looked at him, direct, unflinching, made him tell the truth. "My name is Marcus Donovan. I'm a businessman. I control certain operations in Chicago." Understanding dawned in her eyes. She'd lived on the streets long enough to know what that meant. "You're a criminal." Yes, she should have been afraid. Any rational person would have been terrified, trapped in a penthouse with one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. But Anna just nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. "And you helped us anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" There it was again, that impossible question. Marcus looked at Lily, who was watching him with those enormous eyes, and felt that crack in his chest widen a little more. "Because I could," he said finally. "Because you needed help, and I was there. People like you don't do things without a reason. What do you want from us?" The question was fair. In Marcus's world, everything was a transaction. You didn't give without expecting something in return. But what could this woman and her daughter possibly give him? They had nothing, were nothing in the grand scheme of his empire. "I don't want anything," he said, and realized it was true. "When you're well enough, I'll help you find a place to live, get you set up with what you need. No strings attached." Anna's laugh was bitter. "There are always strings." Not this time. She studied him for a long moment, and Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing right through him, past the expensive suit and the carefully constructed armor, down to something he'd tried very hard to bury. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "What did you expect?" "A monster." She said it simply, without judgment. "That's what Lily called you when she first saw you. The monster in the nice suit. But then you picked me up like I weighed nothing, like I mattered." "Monsters don't do that. You'd be surprised what monsters do," Marcus said quietly. Over the next week, Anna grew stronger. She could walk now, could eat solid food without getting sick. Lily had gained weight, her cheeks filling out, her eyes losing that haunted look. Mrs. Chen had bought them new clothes, and seeing them in jeans and sweaters instead of rags was like watching them transform into different people. But while Anna and Lily healed, Marcus's empire continued to crack. The Russians had indeed taken their business to the North Side Italians, a move that cost Marcus nearly $2 million in monthly revenue. Worse, it emboldened others. A crew in Pilsen stopped making their weekly payments, claiming they didn't respect a boss who'd gone soft. 2 of Marcus's warehouses were hit in coordinated raids that smelled like inside jobs. Someone was testing him, probing for weakness. Vincent came by the penthouse every day with increasingly dire reports. "It's spreading," he said one evening, pacing Marcus's office like a caged animal. "Word is out that you're distracted, that you're losing focus. The Mexicans are pushing into our territory on the west side. The cops we own are getting nervous, asking for more money to stay bought. And Dimitri is telling everyone who'll listen that the great Marcus Donovan has lost his edge. Then we remind them why that's a mistake," Marcus said, his voice cold. "How? By what, exactly? You haven't left this building in a week except to go to the warehouse, and even then you're distracted. You're on your phone checking in with Dr. Reeves about those people instead of focusing on business. Marcus, I love you like a brother, but you're killing us here." Marcus knew Vincent was right. He could feel his grip on the empire slipping, could sense the vultures circling. But every time he thought about going back to the way things were, the casual violence, the ruthless calculations, the absolute prioritization of power over everything else. He thought about Lily asking strangers to share moldy bread. "Set up a meeting with the Pilsen crew," Marcus said. "Tomorrow night. And get me everything we have on whoever's been talking to the Mexicans." Vincent's expression shifted from frustration to something like relief. "Now you're talking. What are you going to do?" "What I've always done. Remind people why they're afraid of me." But that night, after Vincent left, Marcus found himself in the guest room again. Anna was reading to Lily from a book Mrs. Chen had bought, something about a princess and a dragon. Lily was laughing, a sound so pure and joyful that it made Marcus's chest ache. Anna looked up and saw him in the doorway. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Marcus lied. "Just checking in." Lily scrambled off the bed and ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his legs. It was so unexpected that Marcus froze, unsure what to do. When was the last time someone had hugged him? When was the last time anyone had touched him with something other than fear or calculation? "Thank you for saving us," Lily said, her voice muffled against his leg. "Mommy says you're our guardian angel." Marcus looked at Anna over Lily's head. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but also something else. Concern, maybe, or recognition. "I'm not an angel," Marcus said, gently extricating himself from Lily's embrace. "Trust me on that." "Then what are you?" Anna asked. Marcus thought about the meeting tomorrow night, about what he was going to have to do to the Pilsen crew to reestablish his authority. He thought about the violence that was coming, the fear he'd need to instill, the ruthlessness required to hold his empire together. "I'm a man trying to figure that out," he said finally. The next night, Marcus went to the warehouse in Pilsen. Vincent and 4 of their best men came with him, all of them armed, all of them ready for whatever needed to happen. The crew that had stopped making payments was waiting. 5 guys who thought they were tough, who thought Marcus's moment of compassion meant he'd gone weak. Their leader was a kid named Raphael, maybe 25, all swagger and gold chains. "Mr. Donovan," he said, not bothering to hide his smirk. "Glad you could make time for us. Heard you've been busy playing house with some homeless chick." Marcus didn't respond. He walked slowly around the warehouse, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. He could feel Vincent's tension beside him, could sense his men waiting for the signal. "Here's the thing, Raphael," Marcus said finally, his voice conversational. "I've built my reputation on being fair but firm. You work for me. You get paid well. You get protected. But you also pay what you owe, when you owe it. That's the deal. That's always been the deal." "Yeah, well, maybe the deal's changed," Raphael said. "Maybe we don't want to work for a boss who's gone soft." Marcus nodded slowly, as if considering this. Then, faster than anyone could react, he pulled his gun and shot Raphael in the knee. The kid went down screaming, clutching his shattered leg, blood pooling on the concrete floor. "I haven't gone soft," Marcus said, his voice still conversational. "I've just remembered that there are some things more important than money. But business is still business, and disrespect is still disrespect. You have 24 hours to get me every dollar you owe plus interest. If you don't, I won't shoot your knee next time. We clear?" The other crew members were nodding frantically. Their earlier bravado evaporated. Marcus holstered his gun and walked out, Vincent and his men following. In the car, Vincent was practically vibrating with satisfaction. Now that's the Marcus I know. That's the boss this city respects. But Marcus felt sick. He'd done what was necessary, what his position demanded. He'd reestablished his authority, sent a message that would ripple through the organization, and yet all he could think about was Lily's small arms around his legs, her voice calling him a guardian angel. What kind of angel shot a man in the knee? When he got back to the penthouse, it was past midnight. He expected everyone to be asleep, but Anna was awake, sitting in the living room with a cup of tea. She looked up when he entered, and something in her expression told him she knew. Maybe she smelled the gun smoke on his clothes, or maybe she just recognized the look in his eyes. "Bad night?" she asked quietly. Marcus poured himself a bourbon, his hands steady despite the turmoil inside. "Just business. The kind of business that requires you to hurt people." It wasn't a question. Marcus drained half his glass before answering. "Yes." Anna was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not going to judge you. I don't have that right. You saved our lives when no one else would. But Marcus," she hesitated, "I see the way you look at Lily, like she reminds you of something you lost. And I see the way you look after you come back from your business, like you're trying to wash something off that won't come clean. What's your point?" My point is that you can't be both people. You can't be the man who saves a dying woman in an alley and the man who does whatever you did tonight. Eventually, you're going to have to choose. Marcus finished his bourbon and set the glass down carefully. What if I don't want to choose? What if I want to be both? Then you'll tear yourself apart, Anna said simply, and everyone around you will get caught in the wreckage. She was right, and Marcus knew it. He could feel it happening already, the two parts of himself pulling in opposite directions, the ruthless crime lord and the man who'd remembered how to feel compassion. One of them would have to win. He just didn't know which one he wanted it to be, or which one he could afford for it to be. Outside, Chicago slept, unaware that its most dangerous man was having a crisis of conscience. And in the shadows, his enemies continued to circle, waiting for the moment when his divided heart would make him vulnerable enough to destroy. That moment was coming. Marcus could feel it like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and devastating. The only question was whether he'd survive it. The call came at 3 a.m, 2 weeks after Marcus had shot Raphael in the knee. Tommy's voice was tight with urgency. "Boss, we've got a problem. It's Vincent." Marcus was out of bed and dressed in under 2 minutes, his heart pounding with a fear he hadn't felt in years. Vincent was more than his second in command. He was the closest thing Marcus had to family. If something had happened to him... "Talk to me," Marcus said, already heading for the elevator. He was leaving Rossi's restaurant on Taylor Street. Someone hit him. 3 guys. Professional job. He's alive, but barely. They took him to Northwestern Memorial. But Marcus... Tommy's voice cracked. "They're saying it's bad. Real bad." The drive to the hospital was a blur. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities, calculating who would be bold enough to go after Vincent. The Russians? The Mexicans? Some crew he'd pissed off years ago, finally seeing an opportunity for revenge. Vincent was in surgery when Marcus arrived. The waiting room was filled with their people. Soldiers, lieutenants, guys who'd worked for them for years. They all stood when Marcus entered, their faces grim. This was a declaration of war, and everyone knew it. "What do we know?" Marcus asked. Harlow, one of their senior guys, stepped forward. 3 shooters, all wearing masks. They were waiting for Vincent when he came out of the restaurant, emptied their clips into his car, then disappeared. No witnesses willing to talk. No cameras that caught anything useful. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Vincent's security? Dead. Both of them. They went down protecting him. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, cold and focused. This was the world he'd built, where violence was currency and loyalty was paid for in blood. He'd known the rules when he started this game, had accepted them as the price of power. But now, standing in this hospital waiting room, smelling disinfectant and fear, he wondered if the price was too high. A surgeon emerged 4 hours later, still in his scrubs, exhaustion written across his face. "Mr. Calabrese is stable, but it was close. He took 3 bullets, one in the shoulder, one in the abdomen, one that grazed his skull. We've repaired the internal damage, but the next 48 hours are critical. He's strong, though. He's fighting, and I see him. He's unconscious, but yes. 5 minutes." Vincent looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed. His face was pale, his breathing assisted by a ventilator. Marcus sat beside him, taking his friend's hand carefully, mindful of the IV lines. "I'm going to find who did this," Marcus said quietly, "and I'm going to make them pay. That's a promise, brother." Vincent couldn't respond, but Marcus imagined he heard him anyway. That's the Marcus I know. That's the boss this city respects. When Marcus returned to the penthouse, dawn was breaking over Chicago. The city looked almost beautiful in the early light, the skyline painted in shades of gold and pink. It was easy to forget, looking at it like this, that beneath the beauty was a machine of violence and greed, constantly grinding, constantly hungry. Anna was awake, making coffee in the kitchen. She'd become comfortable in the penthouse over the past weeks, moving through the space with an ease that Marcus found both comforting and unsettling. Lily was still asleep, her small form curled up in the guest bed. "You look terrible," Anna said, handing him a cup of coffee. "My best friend was shot tonight. He might not make it." Anna's expression shifted to genuine concern. "I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" "No. This is my world. My problem." Marcus drank the coffee, barely tasting it. "You and Lily should probably leave soon. It's not safe here anymore. Because of what happened to your friend. Because I'm at war, and wars have casualties. I can't guarantee your safety if you stay." Anna was quiet for a moment, studying him with those honey-colored eyes that saw too much. "You're going to retaliate, aren't you? You're going to hurt whoever did this." "I'm going to kill them," Marcus said flatly. "Every single person involved. That's how this works." "And then what? Someone retaliates against you, and you retaliate against them, and it never ends? How many people have to die before you're satisfied?" "As many as it takes." "To accomplish what, exactly? To prove you're the strongest, the most feared?" "Marcus, I've watched you these past weeks. I've seen you with Lily, the way you smile when she laughs, the way you check on us every night before you go to bed. That's not a monster. That's a man who's capable of caring about people. But you keep trying to bury that part of yourself under all this violence and power. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Anna interrupted. "You think you have to choose between being strong and being human. You think compassion is weakness, that caring about people makes you vulnerable. But Marcus, you're wrong. The real weakness is being so afraid of your own humanity that you destroy it." Marcus wanted to argue, to explain how the world really worked, how you couldn't build an empire on compassion and kindness. But before he could respond, his phone rang. It was Carlo. "Boss, we found something." One of the shooters dropped a phone at the scene. Our tech guy cracked it. "You need to see this." 20 minutes later, Marcus was in a warehouse on the south side, looking at a laptop screen that showed text messages between the shooters and their employer. The messages were coded, but the meaning was clear enough. Someone had paid $50,000 to hit Vincent, with a bonus if they killed him. "Can we trace who sent the money?" Marcus asked. "Already did," Carlo said. "It came from an account linked to Dmitry Volkov. The Russians." Of course. Marcus had embarrassed Dmitry by missing that meeting. And then the Northside Italians had proven to be unreliable partners. This was Dmitry's way of sending a message. "Cross me, and I'll take everything from you. Get everyone together," Marcus said. "Every soldier, every lieutenant, everyone who's ever worked for us. I want them at the main warehouse tonight. We're going to war." The meeting that night was like something out of a movie. 50 men packed into the warehouse, all of them armed, all of them ready to follow Marcus into hell if he asked. He stood before them, feeling the weight of their loyalty, their faith that he would lead them to victory. "The Russians tried to kill Vincent," Marcus said, his voice carrying through the space. "They thought they could weaken us, thought they could take what's ours. They were wrong. Tonight, we show them what happens when you come after the Donovan organization. Tonight, we remind Chicago why they fear us." The men roared their approval, hungry for blood, for revenge. This was what they understood, what they'd signed up for: violence and loyalty, fear and respect. The old rules, the ones that had governed Marcus's world for 20 years. But as Marcus looked at their faces, he felt something unexpected: doubt. These men were ready to die for him, ready to kill for him. But why? What had he really given them except money and the promise of protection? What kind of empire was this, built on fear and maintained through violence? He thought about Anna's words. You can't be both people. Eventually, you're going to have to choose. He thought about Lily, sleeping peacefully in his penthouse, safe and warm and innocent. He thought about Vincent, lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life because of choices Marcus had made, enemies Marcus had created. "Change of plans," Marcus heard himself say. The warehouse went silent. 50 pairs of eyes stared at him, confused. "We're not going to war with the Russians," Marcus continued. "Not yet. First, I'm going to talk to Dmitry. I'm going to give him one chance to make this right, to pay for what he's done without more bloodshed." "Boss," Carlo started, but Marcus cut him off. "If he refuses, if he shows any sign of disrespect, then we go to war. But I'm not sending you all into a bloodbath without at least trying to resolve this another way. Some of you have families, kids. I'm not going to make them orphans unless there's no other choice." The men looked uncertain now, glancing at each other. This wasn't the Marcus they knew, the one who'd burned down the Moretti warehouse with people still inside. This was someone different, someone who hesitated, who considered consequences, someone who'd gone soft. Marcus could see it in their faces, could feel the shift in the room. He was losing them, losing the respect that had kept his empire intact. Anna was right. He couldn't be both people, and by trying to be, he was destroying everything he'd built. "Meeting adjourned," Marcus said. "I'll handle Dmitry myself. The rest of you, stay ready. If this goes south, we'll need to move fast." As the men filed out, Marcus caught Carlo's expression. It was a look he'd seen before, on the faces of rivals and enemies. It was the look of someone calculating odds, measuring weakness, considering opportunities. It was the look of betrayal waiting to happen. Marcus drove back to the penthouse alone, refusing Tommy's offer to accompany him. He needed to think, needed to figure out who he was and what he wanted. The city passed by his windows, indifferent to his crisis, continuing its endless cycle of ambition and decay. When he got home, he found Anna and Lily in the living room, playing a card game. They looked up when he entered, and Lily immediately ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs in that way she'd started doing. "You're home," she said happily. "Can you play with us?" Marcus looked at Anna over Lily's head. She was watching him with an expression that might have been hope, or might have been fear. "I can't," Marcus said gently, extracting himself from Lily's embrace. "I have work to do." "You always have work," Lily said, pouting. "Don't you ever just want to have fun?" The question was so simple, so innocent, that it broke something inside Marcus. When was the last time he'd done something just for fun? When was the last time he'd laughed, really laughed, without calculation or agenda? "Maybe later," he said, and saw disappointment flash across Lily's face. In his office, Marcus poured himself a bourbon and stood at his window, looking out at the city he'd conquered. He'd built an empire, accumulated more wealth and power than he'd ever dreamed possible. He'd made himself into something feared and respected, someone who mattered, but at what cost? His best friend was in the hospital. His men were losing faith in him. His enemies were circling. And all because he'd stopped his car for a little girl with moldy bread. Anna was right. He couldn't be both people. He had to choose. The question was, which version of himself could he live with, and which one would survive what was coming? Marcus arranged the meeting with Dmitry Volkov for the following evening at a neutral location, a private room in an upscale restaurant in the Loop. He went alone, against every instinct and every piece of advice from his remaining loyal men. Tommy had practically begged him to bring backup, but Marcus refused. This needed to be just the two of them, two men trying to prevent a war that would leave bodies piled in the streets. Dmitry was already there when Marcus arrived, sitting at a table with a bottle of vodka and 2 glasses. He was a bear of a man, 6'4", and built like he'd spent his youth breaking rocks in Siberia. His face was all hard angles and cold eyes, the face of someone who'd survived things that would have broken lesser men. "Marcus Donovan," Dmitry said, his accent thick. "I wondered if you would come. Wondered if you had the balls after what happened to your friend." Marcus sat down across from him, ignoring the vodka. "You tried to kill Vincent. I sent a message. There is difference." Dmitry poured himself a drink. "You insult me? You miss important meeting? You act like Dmitry Volkov is nothing. So I remind you that I am not nothing. I am a man who can reach into your organization and hurt you whenever I want. And now I'm here, giving you one chance to make this right. Pay for Vincent's medical bills. Pay compensation to the families of the men who died protecting him. And we can move past this." Dmitry laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You think you can make demands? You who have gone soft, who plays house with homeless woman and her brat. The whole city talks about it, Marcus. They say you have lost your edge, that you care more about playing hero than running your business. They say you are weak. Then they're wrong. Are they?" Dmitry leaned forward. "I think they are right. I think you have forgotten what it takes to survive in this world. You have forgotten that power is everything, that mercy is for fools. So I will make you offer instead. Give me 30% of your operations, and I will let you keep the rest. You can play with your little family, be the good man you want to be, and I will handle the real business." Marcus felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "That's not going to happen. Then we go to war. And Marcus, I promise you, you will lose. Not because you are a weak fighter, but because you are weak here." Dmitry tapped his chest. "In the heart. You care too much now. You have something to lose. That makes you vulnerable. Everyone has something to lose, Dmitry. Not me. I have already lost everything that matters. My wife, my daughter, they died in Moscow, killed by men like us. So I have nothing left but business, but power. You cannot hurt me, Marcus, because there is nothing left to hurt. But you have your friend in hospital. You have your woman and her child. You have empire built on reputation that is crumbling. You have so much to lose." The truth of Dmitry's words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The Russian was right. Having something to care about made you vulnerable. It gave your enemies leverage, gave them targets. This was why Marcus had spent 20 years building walls around his heart, refusing to let anyone get close. This was why he'd made himself into a monster, because monsters couldn't be hurt. Last chance, Marcus said quietly. Make this right, or face the consequences. Dimitri smiled, showing teeth like tombstones. I think I will take my chances. Goodbye, Marcus Donovan. Give my regards to your little family. The threat was clear. Dimitri wasn't just coming after Marcus's empire. He was coming after Anna and Lily. He was going to use Marcus's compassion as a weapon against him. Marcus left the restaurant with his mind racing. He'd tried to do this the right way, tried to avoid bloodshed. But Dimitri had made his choice, and now Marcus had to make his. He called Carlo from the car. Gather everyone. We're going to war. But when Marcus arrived at the warehouse, he found it nearly empty. Only a handful of men were there. Tommy, a few loyal soldiers, and that was it. Carlo was nowhere to be seen. Where is everyone? Marcus demanded. Tommy's face was grim. Carlo made a move, boss. He's been talking to the other crews, telling them you've lost your edge, that it's time for new leadership. Most of the men went with him. They think he's the future. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. Carlo's betrayal shouldn't have surprised him. He'd seen it coming in the warehouse, had recognized that calculating look, but it still felt like a knife between the ribs. How many stayed loyal? Maybe a dozen. Not enough to fight a war against the Russians and Carlo's crew. Marcus looked at the handful of men who'd remained, seeing their fear and their loyalty in equal measure. These were the ones who'd believed in him, who'd stayed even when it looked like he was finished. He owed them better than to lead them into a slaughter. All right, Marcus said. Here's what we're going to do. Tommy, I need you to get Anna and Lily out of the city. Take them somewhere safe, somewhere no one can find them. Give them money, new identities if you have to. Make sure they're protected. Boss, what about you? I'm going to end this, one way or another. Marcus spent the next hour making arrangements, moving money, setting up contingencies. If he didn't survive what was coming, he wanted to make sure Anna and Lily would be taken care of, that they'd have a chance at a real life, away from all of this. When he returned to the penthouse, he found Anna packing. She looked up when he entered, her face pale but determined. Tommy called. He said we need to leave. Yes, it's not safe here anymore. My enemies are going to come after you to get to me. Because you helped us. Because you showed compassion. Anna's voice was steady, but Marcus could see tears in her eyes. This is my fault. No, Marcus said firmly. This is the fault of the world we live in. The choices I made long before I met you. You and Lily, you didn't cause this. If anything, you reminded me that there's more to life than power and fear. Lily emerged from the guest room, clutching a stuffed bear that Mrs. Chen had bought her. Are we leaving? I don't want to go. I like it here. I like you. Marcus knelt down so he was at her eye level, just like he'd done in that alley weeks ago. I know, sweetheart, but it's not safe for you here anymore. Tommy's going to take you and your mom somewhere nice, somewhere you can go to school and make friends and be a regular kid. Will you come visit us? Marcus looked at Anna over Lily's head, seeing the question in her eyes too. Would he survive what was coming? Would there be anything left of him to visit? I'll try, he said, which was the most honest answer he could give. After they left, the penthouse felt impossibly empty. Marcus poured himself a bourbon and stood at his window one last time, looking out at the city that had made him and was now trying to destroy him. He thought about his father, dying alone in that apartment in Bridgeport. He thought about all the choices that had led him here, to this moment, where everything he'd built was crumbling around him. He thought about Lily's small arms around his legs, her voice calling him a guardian angel. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. Marcus Donovan, he answered. Mr. Donovan, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Chicago Police Department. I'm calling about a situation that's developed. We have credible intelligence that there's going to be a major gang conflict tonight. Multiple crews, heavy weapons. A lot of people are going to die if we don't stop it. Marcus was silent, calculating. The police getting involved would complicate everything, but it might also be his only chance to survive. What do you want from me, detective? I want you to help me prevent a bloodbath. I know who you are, what you do. I've been building a case against you for 2 years. But right now, I don't care about that. I care about keeping innocent people from getting caught in the crossfire. So I'm offering you a deal. Help me stop this war, and I'll give you a head start before I come after you. Why would you do that? Because a few weeks ago, I saw you carry a dying woman and her daughter out of an alley. I saw you get them medical help, take them into your home. That doesn't fit with the monster I thought you were. So maybe, just maybe, there's enough good left in you to do the right thing one more time." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. If he worked with the police, he'd be betraying everything he'd built, everything he'd believed in. He'd be admitting that he couldn't win this fight on his own, that the empire was over. But if he didn't, people would die. His remaining loyal men would die. Innocent bystanders would die. And for what? To preserve an empire that was already crumbling? To maintain power that had cost him his humanity? He thought about Anna's words. You can't be both people. Eventually, you're going to have to choose. All right, detective, Marcus said. Let's talk. The operation went down at midnight in a warehouse district on the south side, where Carlo had arranged to meet with Dimitri and finalize their alliance against Marcus. Detective Chen had assembled a massive task force. 50 officers, SWAT teams, federal agents. They surrounded the warehouse, cutting off all escape routes. Marcus was there too, wearing a wire, providing intelligence about the layout, the players, the weapons. It felt like betrayal, working with the police against his own people. But as he watched through binoculars from a surveillance van, seeing Carlo and Dimitri shake hands over his corpse-to-be, he realized these weren't his people anymore. They'd chosen power over loyalty, ambition over honor. They'd become everything he'd tried not to be. All units, move in, Detective Chen ordered. The raid was swift and professional. Carlo and Dimitri were arrested along with 40 of their men, caught with enough weapons and drugs to put them away for decades. A few tried to fight, but they were quickly subdued. No shots were fired. No one died. It was over. Marcus stood outside the warehouse as the sun rose over Chicago, watching the arrested men being loaded into police vans. Carlo saw him and started shouting, cursing him for a traitor, promising revenge. Marcus felt nothing. The man being dragged away in handcuffs was a stranger, someone he'd once trusted who'd proven himself unworthy of that trust. Detective Chen approached, holding a pair of handcuffs. Your turn, Mr. Donovan. I figured. For what it's worth, you did the right thing tonight. You saved lives. Doesn't change what I've done. Doesn't erase 20 years of crimes. No, Chen agreed. But maybe it's a start. The trial took 6 months. Marcus's lawyer, the best money could buy, negotiated a deal. Full cooperation with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. Marcus gave them everything. Names, locations, financial records, details of every crime he'd committed or ordered. He dismantled his own empire, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole in 8. The day before he was supposed to report, Marcus received a letter. The return address was from a small town in Montana he'd never heard of. Inside was a photo of Anna and Lily standing in front of a modest house with a yard. They were smiling, healthy, safe. Lily was holding a sign that read, "Thank you for saving us." On the back, Anna had written, "We're building a new life here. Lily's in school, making friends. I got a job at the local library. We think about you every day. You gave us a chance when no one else would. Now it's your turn to have a chance. Use your time to figure out who you really want to be. We'll be waiting when you get out. Love, Anna, and Lily." Marcus stared at that photo for a long time, memorizing every detail. This was what he'd fought for, what he'd sacrificed his empire to protect. 2 people who'd reminded him that he was still human, still capable of caring about something other than power. Prison was hard. Marcus had made a lot of enemies over the years, and some of them were serving time in the same facility. He had to fight, had to prove he wasn't weak, despite his cooperation with the feds. But he also did something he'd never done before. He started helping people. He tutored inmates working on their GEDs. He mediated disputes before they turned violent. He started a program to help soon-to-be-released prisoners prepare for life on the outside. Slowly, grudgingly, he earned a different kind of respect, not based on fear, but on the genuine good he was doing. He thought about his father often, about the man who died alone and powerless. Marcus had spent his whole life trying to be the opposite of that, accumulating power and wealth to ensure he'd never be vulnerable. But in the end, all that power had made him more vulnerable, not less. It had isolated him, hardened him, turned him into someone he didn't recognize. It had taken a little girl with moldy bread to show him another way. 8 years later, Marcus walked out of prison into a cold November morning, that reminded him of the day he'd first seen Lily and Anna. He was 50 years old, his hair more silver than dark now, his face lined with the weight of his choices, but his eyes were different, softer, more human. Tommy was waiting for him, older too, but still loyal. "Good to see you, boss." "I'm not anyone's boss anymore, Tommy. Just Marcus." "Where to?" Marcus pulled out the letter he'd kept all these years, now worn soft from constant handling. "Montana. There are some people I need to see." The drive took 2 days. Marcus watched the country pass by his window, seeing it with new eyes. He'd spent so much of his life focused on Chicago, on his empire, on the narrow world of power and violence. He'd forgotten how big the world was, how many different ways there were to live. The house was exactly like the photo, a modest 2-story with a yard where a tire swing hung from an old oak tree. Marcus stood at the end of the driveway for a long moment, suddenly nervous. What if they'd moved on? What if they didn't want to see him? What if... The front door opened, and Lily came running out. She was 15 now, tall and beautiful, with her mother's honey-colored eyes. She stopped a few feet away, studying him. "You came," she said, her voice full of wonder. "I promised I'd try." Then she was hugging him, and Marcus felt tears on his face for the first time in decades. Anna appeared in the doorway, older but still beautiful, smiling at him with an expression that said, "Welcome home." "We saved you some dinner," she said. "I hope you like meatloaf." Marcus laughed, a sound that felt rusty but real. "I love meatloaf." That night, sitting around the dinner table with Anna and Lily, listening to them talk about school and work and the ordinary miracles of everyday life, Marcus realized something profound. He'd spent 20 years building an empire, accumulating power and wealth and fear, and he'd lost it all in a matter of weeks. But here, in this modest house in Montana, eating meatloaf with 2 people who'd once been strangers, he'd found something worth more than any empire. A family, a purpose, a chance to be the man he'd always had the potential to be, before the world had taught him that compassion was weakness and power was everything. "What are you going to do now?" Lily asked. "Now that you're free?" Marcus looked at Anna, seeing the question in her eyes too. What came next? Who would he be in this new world? Without his empire, without his power, without the armor he'd worn for so long? "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'd like to figure it out here if you'll have me." Anna reached across the table and took his hand. "We've been waiting 8 years for you to come home, Marcus. Of course we'll have you." Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Marcus and Anna sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the Montana sky. The silence was comfortable, peaceful in a way Marcus had never experienced in Chicago, where silence had always felt like the calm before violence. "I'm not the same man I was," Marcus said quietly. "Prison changed me. Or maybe it just finished what you and Lily started." "Good," Anna said. "That man was destroying himself. This man," she squeezed his hand, "this man has a chance to build something real, something that matters. I don't know how to be normal. I don't know how to live without power, without control. Then learn. You learned how to build an empire. You can learn how to build a life." Marcus thought about that, about the years ahead, about the possibility of redemption and second chances. He thought about his father, dying alone, and about the empire he'd built to prove he was different. In the end, he'd learned the hardest lesson of all. Power couldn't save you. Money couldn't save you. Only love could do that. Only connection. Only caring about something more than yourself. "Thank you," he said to Anna, "for waiting, for believing I could be better. You saved our lives," Anna reminded him, "when no one else would, when it cost you everything. That's not something you forget." The November wind carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, so different from the smell of Chicago, the exhaust and ambition and desperation. Marcus breathed it in, feeling something inside him settle, some part of himself he'd thought was dead stirring back to life. He'd been a monster once, a man who'd built an empire on fear and violence. He'd been powerful and wealthy and respected, in the way that people respect things that can hurt them. But here, on this porch in Montana, holding the hand of a woman who'd seen him at his worst and believed in his best, Marcus Donovan discovered something more valuable than any empire. He discovered peace. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. He'd have to find work, build a new identity, learn how to be part of a community instead of ruling over one. He'd have to face his past, make amends where he could, live with the guilt of the things he couldn't change. But for the first time in his life, Marcus felt ready for the challenge. Not because he was strong or powerful or feared, but because he wasn't alone anymore. He had Anna and Lily. He had a chance to be better, to build something that mattered. He had hope. And in the end, that was worth more than all the empires in the world. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives, and leave a comment below telling us where in the world you're listening from. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you stories that touch the heart and challenge the mind. Thank you for being part of our community.